Hey everybody, it's Honesty, and this is actually take three. So we have had some technical difficulties, but we're just gonna keep on going. This week we're talking about Parker and Rut, and their story is Love's Ineligible Receiver. And AG, now that we are recording, how you doing?
I'm great and glad that it's a short week.
Same, same. So I was just saying before we got to take three that I have such a hard time choosing between Rhett and Parker, Cole and Jordan, and Will and Ramsey for my favorite. I feel like it's Will and Ramsey, but I don't know. But you said that's something that I thought was really interesting. So tell me about your favorite in the lineup of the Connecticut Kings.
That with the proviso that every single book knocks it out of the park, and I've read all of the books more than once. I think Rhett and Parker are my favorite, and I've definitely read them more than any other book in terms of rereads. I think I've probably read their story 4 times. Um, so
It's
and
so good.
Rhett just we'll get into why, as we kind of get into the characters and whatnot. But Rut is my boo boo, and I don't even mean in terms of like he's not a book bait for me. He,
Mm-hmm.
he was like a family member for me. I just loved
Mm.
him so much, and the reason why is because he reminded me of my brothers.
Okay.
So I was just like, oh, I just adore you. You are just
Yeah.
like I
He's a
got him
sweetheart.
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I put in my notes, so we're just gonna jump ahead and be out of order as we usually are. But what I said of him is that he is the kind of person that no one would know how loving and kind and generous he is because he reserves it for a select few.
Yes.
And people like that, I just have a special place in my heart.
You know, I understood Rut from the very beginning, and
Yep.
I'll tell you why. Right, and I've said this before, but about Love and CCJ, I think does this as well. I think it stands out for me with Love because Love tends to write, as she calls them, deeply damaged,
Mm-hmm.
broken characters, right? Deeply flawed. Rut reminded me of my brothers and their friends, right? In a sense that Rut was not some, I don't know how to treat anybody and I don't know how to treat any kind of woman, right? He
Right.
was not some clueless oaf, all women are bitches.
Yep.
That was not his philosophy, right? His philosophy was, there are classes of women and I'm going to treat you and interact with you based on the class that I put you in, based on what you show me.
Yeah.
Right. And so that resonated with me because my brothers and I was a tomboy. I have 4 brothers, and they were not as crass or as vulgar as Rut in terms of how he delivered his message, but the message was the same, right? The message was, there are the girls you bring in through the front door, and then the girls that you bring in through the basement door. Do not be, do not be a girl that gets brought in through the basement door. And I mean, it
I'm
was
dying.
apropos because at the time we did have a basement door, right? So they weren't just
Mm-hmm.
using an analogy, they were being very real about
Right.
the girls that they snuck in through the basement and the girls that they brought through the front door to meet our parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, Rut was more crass and vulgar about it, but his point was, I know the difference between a woman that I deem worthy of respect and some chick out on the street who is carrying herself a certain way, and I'm going to react to her a certain way. Now, I'm not saying that philosophy and that mentality is not without its flaws. It absolutely is. But that's different to me from a man who is, we're all the same, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
everybody can get called bitch, everybody gets called hoe, everybody is, I treat you all the same. That was not Rut. And I thought that was an important dichotomy there, right? He understood the difference. He recognized there was a difference. He knew how to treat a woman because he was incredibly, to your point, sweet and generous. He was incredibly thoughtful, right? And attentive to details. Even when he leveraged other people to get things done, he paid attention and he was very thoughtful, right? So he was not some oaf who needed to necessarily be taught how you interact with a woman. He understood that, but as Divine told him, he chose to deal with women at sea level. Right. I love when Divine said that to me. He was like, you deal with the pickings that are, down there with you. And you use that to justify how you continue to treat them. You choose not to deal with women that are on a higher level from you because they would smell your BS a mile away. But I felt like Rut was cognizant of that. He's just, look, he was young, he was rich, right? And he was in the NFL. There was no reason for him to be rushing towards, a mature relationship at that point in time based on his age and where he was in his life, right? Him being in the strip club made perfect sense to me. We're talking about an early 20s, wealthy, good-looking Black man who's in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
But I loved Rut. I absolutely loved Rut. And I liked Parker. I confess I didn't fully understand Parker, but it wasn't to a point where I was like, what's wrong with you? I was more just kind of perplexed. And I was like, I don't quite understand. And what I'll tell you is I didn't understand why Parker lived there as long as she did in light of the fact that Jimmy's kids were threatening her. I'm not, because I understood why Parker chose to continue to help, right, and be a caretaker, but I didn't understand why she chose to stay in a housing insecure situation when she didn't have to.
I feel like, wow, we just jumped into the deep end with this one. I'm here for it.
We sure did.
I feel like she made a promise to Jimmy, and no, things weren't perfect, but she wasn't sure what she wanted to do next. And I'm not sure, because her mom ends up saying to Rut, if she wanted to leave this house, she would. She got money.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? She got enough change to make a move.
Exactly.
And so I think she knew that if she needed to leave, she could. She knew that she had made a promise to him. What she didn't know was what she wanted to do next. And so she just dealt with it. I think that Jimmy's kids, while they were terrible people, and they are absolutely each and every one of them on the who needs to be stabbed list.
Absolutely.
I feel like they only became more threatening as Jimmy got sick, close to death. So depending on who Jimmy was when he was well, and she says he was vibrant and he was alive and he was fun to be around, he probably was not around his kids all like that. And he definitely was not around to raise them because he was in the league.
Correct.
And so I think the vultures started circling once he got sick, and then when she agreed to stay and take care of him, they stayed out of her way because they wasn't getting ready to do it.
Correct.
But then once it became clear that, okay, he's getting infections and he's really, really, really a shell of himself, he is all the way downhill of going downhill. Well, let me see what's going on in the house so I can see, you know what I'm saying, what my come up is getting ready to be. So I think it was a combination of her having not decided what she was going to do next, and that situation just being one that was working for her based on where she was when he got that way. Because the abuse that she suffered that was all over the internet, I feel like left her in a low enough place that maybe she wasn't all the way ready to strike out on her own and live her best life. And
I get that.
So I just kind of feel like it was a holding pattern place where she ended up holding almost too long, and right when it becomes too long, here comes Rut. Because I feel like I think that if Rut had not come along, she would have stayed in that house. Rut hastened the siblings getting on her back. But had Rut not come along, she would have stayed in the house until she died. They would have put her out. She would have found an apartment, and she would have still been making her soaps and oils in her apartment. Like, I don't think she was ready to name her next chapter.
I get that. And I'm not even talking about naming the next chapter. So let me, a couple of things that you said, because I agree with you that she was rudderless at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was like, well, here is as good a place as any, and I gave my word.
Yeah.
And they definitely began ratcheting up the pressure once Rut came in the picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was clear that they would periodically pull the, as his condition worsened, they'd pull the, this is not working, this is not working.
Right.
And I just kind of felt like once I knew she had this trust fund, I
Mm-hmm.
just thought to myself, at a certain point, you do have to choose yourself, even if that's leaving this house and, stepping back and letting go of this situation, because you've done all that you can do. But to
Mm-hmm.
have the threat of your shelter to be snatched away from you at a moment's notice,
Yeah.
right? Despite the fact that you are doing what they don't want to do, just living under that. Like once I found out that financially that was not a requirement, I was like, because it would have been one thing. Like it was already, I was like, okay, Parker's loyalty is on another level. Okay, fine, right? But it was that in combination with his children threatening to put you out. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, sis, I mean, you've done all that you can. He didn't. And what pissed me off, one of the many things that pissed me off, but what pissed me off about this particular situation with Jimmy was that Jimmy had the presence of mind to solicit that promise from her, right? And to say, my
Mm-hmm.
children are not going to take care of me. Please don't leave me. They will put me in a home and let me
Mm-hmm.
die. But he did not put things in place to protect her
Yeah.
while she protected him, And I was just like, he asked her to protect him. And yet he did not, even when he was making that request, he did not, put things in place to protect her while she protected him. And I was just like, bruh, you were just selfish until the very end. He really, did not deserve the level of loyalty that Parker showed him, because when they had that conversation, he could have then called his lawyer and said, let's do a power of attorney. Let me put some things in writing, because I know that once I deteriorate past the ability to communicate, my kids are going to swoop in. And here is what I want. And I was just like I of all the things you abused her physically and emotionally and all of that, and this woman agrees to stand by you, and you don't even provide her with the protection so that your children are swooping in on her whenever they feel like it and threatening her, and then ultimately evict her, because they don't like the fact that after years of holding you down, that was the other thing, right? Like this had been steady state for years. They were
Mm-hmm.
behaving as if Jimmy just deteriorated on Monday, and by Wednesday, Parker had a man in the house.
Right.
But emotions are not logical, right? And
Yeah.
so on the one hand, I was like, look, emotions are not logical. That's their father. But on the other hand, I was like, ain't this been years? Like, are you kidding me? Like, oh no, he's not coming back. Like, stop. Like, knock it off. But we all knew the kids agree. All three of the kids, Jimmy too, all needed to be stabbed. So
Yeah, I kind of feel, I think that he never was protecting her.
never. You're right.
You know, she just hadn't decided what was next, and she said she was going to do this. I think she was rudderless when she met him. I think she was rudderless while she was with him, and I think she was rudderless as he was declining. And
Yes.
and her mom even talks about how, I feel like she was a chemistry major, but she like really didn't know what she wanted to do. I think she just happened to be there, and that's kind of where she ended up. And I say that only because even once Rep buys the house for her, she gets there, she's looking at Fats, and Fats is like, yeah, the bed is coming tomorrow. It's supposed to be some paperwork here. Like, and she doesn't as angry as she is at him, she doesn't leave immediately. She
Right.
stays there, and well, we'll see. You know what I mean? And it wasn't, I don't want to say, it's not that she was passive. It's almost like she just was actively not making a decision. Like, if that's a thing. You know what I mean?
See, now that you say that, you're right. It was a continuation of prior behavior. Whereas I chalk
Yeah.
that up to, at that point, she knew she was pregnant. right?
Yeah,
She
it
knew
could
she was
be.
pregnant. She was shell shocked at them finally pulling the trigger and putting her out. And here was this home, and it's like, well, I have this baby, and so it sounds good to just pick up and go, but I have this baby, and the father of my child has purchased this for me, and he purchased it before he even knew
Before.
I was pregnant.
Yep.
Which I was just like, oh, right,
Which
I
I
just
loved him.
adore
I
you,
loved him.
right? Before he knew about the eviction, before he knew she was
Hmm.
pregnant, that house had been set in motion.
And while
Like,
he was
wow.
angry with her and
Yes.
heard from facts that she was not okay, because he wanted her to move long before that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I don't know. I can't quite settle on the correct words for Parker's behavior, but I felt like I understood it. And yeah, I just felt like I understood it. And I don't know if it's because
And
I'm
you know
writing.
what's interesting? Parker was being herself, right?
Yep.
So, because the same way that she was so incredibly supportive of Jimmy is the same way she was immediately supportive of Rut, right?
Yeah.
Like immediately, like stepped in to be there for him when the cousin got killed, Brian got killed,
Hmm.
and Rut is a mess, and she just immediately kind of steps in, right, and is doing what needs to be done and being there for him. I mean, she checks him when he gets beside himself. And is like, look, if you want me to be here for you, I'll be here for you, but you're not going to use me as a punching bag. And he
Right.
gets sunned, and
I
he's like, I'm
loved that
sorry,
line.
right? He's like, I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. But
Uh-huh.
in terms of thinking of, let me bring food, let me, right?
Yes,
And I feel like that's also a woman. Like, we think of some of those details that are
absolutely.
really important, but can get lost. And she was just like, this is something I can take off your plate, right? This is something I
Well,
can take off.
and yes, can take off his plate, but also because by that time she already knew who his mother was,
Yeah.
and she knew it wasn't going down like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, this is surprising to me because I don't usually like characters like this, but I really enjoyed how Love wrote um, Rhett's mom. It was
Mm-hmm.
perfect. From her drunk walking down the stairs and missing a step to him
Yes.
being, you know what I mean? It was like perfect. Even to when the Hawkins come over, I forget the girl's name, his high school
Kim
girlfriend,
Hawkins.
Kim, when Kim
Yes.
comes
Kim
over
Hawkins.
and the mother is trying to, come on, Kim, you're gonna hurt the baby, sit down.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
just the quintessential, like it, she just wrote it. She wrote it to a T. Her dad,
Yeah.
his mom, and I loved her characterization of her. It felt entirely real. That he would have been raised by his parents, but also raising himself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I feel
Yes.
like we talked about this in previous episodes. How
Yes.
love typically writes guys who are special, and the world knows they're special before they do.
Yeah.
And so same with Isaac and the same with Rhett. Like they wouldn't let me smoke, they wouldn't let me sell dope. Like they wouldn't let me do that thing. I was the one that couldn't get locked
Yes.
up. Um,
Yes.
so I thought, and everybody being so proud of him and connected to him, and now we got god cousins and god play cousins and god uncles, and
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
in the neighborhood now is suddenly related to Rhett. I just thought it was so, like, I could see it.
To your point about the parallel that something that we've seen in other books, the child as an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the parent-child dynamic, and
Mm-hmm.
Paula, his mother, she was not like, she wasn't completely distasteful, right?
Right. She wasn't
But
as
it
bad as like
was,
Lex's mom, or yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so it was you were like, damn, it's unfortunate that has to be the dynamic. But you knew she loved her son. She was
Mm-hmm.
proud of her son. She wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just trying to use her son, but was used to finessing him when it came to money, right?
Yes.
And he had peeped the game
Long
years
ago.
ago,
Uh-huh.
right? And it would just in round her every time that came up, when it was the fridge or the door or
Yep.
whatever it was, and just began cutting her out, because rather than, and even the way he tried to check her on it, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
it was respectful, and it was mine. We not balling like that yet. I can't,
Mm-hmm.
like, we can't be doing it like that just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just being like, Ma, you full of shit. I
Right.
know it, you know it, knock it off, right? Like he wasn't going to do that. And that's, again, going back to my point about Rhett understanding in his having a system, right, about how he treated people and who got treated what kind of way. It wasn't just this willy-nilly, everybody gets treated, with zero respect. But the Paula dynamic was interesting, and even more, like, I appreciated and I liked that the parents were together, right? But Kadar was in jail, right? And then he comes home, and when he realizes that Paula's drinking is out of control, right? And so he
Mm-hmm.
sends her to rehab. And I liked that it wasn't the cliche, okay, dad comes home and now mom and dad can't stay together because they realize it just ain't
Right.
gonna work. But like, mom
Right.
needed help, so dad got her help, and Kadar struggling with his own, issues with Divine and with Rut and
Well,
being
and
out
he
in
had
the
lost
world. And
control. Yeah.
he had absolutely lost control. And that was one of the things both I hated it. I understood it as much as I could, right? That it was misdirected anger, right? His
Yes.
resentment towards Divine, his
Yes.
resentment towards Rut over the fact that he lost control, and
Mm-hmm.
also, he didn't get to see his son become a man, right? And
Yep.
so when the therapist made the point to Rut that, like, she was like, your father's frame of reference has been severely narrowed
Mm-hmm.
for the last, 10 plus years, right?
Mm-hmm.
While yours has been broadened beyond what he could possibly imagine. And she was like, do not, don't shrink yourself and your perspective because you're trying to fit his frame of reference, which no longer applies to you. Like, embrace the fact that it just doesn't apply to you. And that's not a knock on him, but that's just reflective of the fact that y'all have been living very different lives. And therefore your frame of reference is going to be completely different. And it's like, I felt like he heard her at the moment, but it took a while for him to
Yes.
really embrace that truth, right?
Well,
And,
and
and make peace with it.
yes, and we see some of that in him having to like wait for his dad to call and knowing that he was
Yeah.
going to have to spend the whole 15 minutes proving that
Yeah.
he knew the 5% of, you know what I'm saying, that he was the
Yeah.
mathematics and now he got to do the adding and the subtraction, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you could see that he still very much had respect for his father and understood that his dad was in a situation that he did not want to be in and maybe didn't have to be in, but
Yeah.
kind of bit the bullet, to
Mm-hmm.
maintain. And I feel like Rhett he respected his father, he understood where he was coming from, but he was very much trying to negotiate between where, like you're saying, where his father left him and what Rut was able to do, even outside the league, even outside of football, and keep it on the low. You know what I mean? It
Right.
it was just really well done, and I think that's what we found out about Jeremy and the sneakers and like all of that stuff, which I thought was a great addition and really rounded out his character.
Yes, and that was one of the things that I made a note that I loved. Rut's business savvy,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could tell that it was both. They have the conversation about nature versus nurture, right? You
Yeah.
could tell that it was both his natural personality, right, to
Mm-hmm.
be a hustler, and then you saw the benefit of Divine's guidance and
Yeah.
investment and connections, right? That all came together because even when he's asking Parker about her soaps and lotions and stuff, and he just off the top of his head, right? He's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
licensing and, getting it into different, stores and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
and testing just off the top of his head. Right now, granted, at that point, he had several years as an entrepreneur under his
Mm-hmm.
belt. But you
Mm-hmm.
could tell that was also just his natural personality saying,
Yeah.
you have something good here. Let's think about how we take that next step. And
Yeah.
here's some of those I's and that would need to be dotted and some T's that would need to be crossed. And I'm going to reach out to the person that will help me help you navigate
Mm-hmm.
that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Like, I love that. that he was bringing that to the table, and it was something that he was passionate about, and it wasn't in the streets, right? And then we find out about his altruism and his philanthropy in the
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, that he was doing that on the low as well. So I'm telling you, I loved so much about Rut. His packaging, was the diamond in the rough. He was rough around the
Mm-hmm.
edges, but golden, right?
Yeah.
Just truly a heart of gold.
Yeah, very likable character. Even though, so I feel like a little bit because of the trajectory of the story, and kind of we'll get into later their semi abstinence. So, um,
Yeah.
so the story starts, and this is probably, I think this is our first time walking through scenes almost in order, but I just want to like lay the groundwork. So the story starts with Parker working for the Connecticut Kings. She works in the front office, like as a receptionist or something on the side. I don't think it's quite a receptionist, but it's something like that. Um,
Yeah.
like an administrative assistant or something, but like not a
Yep.
personal assistant.
Right.
And I think she picks up a shift as like a waiter, and she's wheeling this cart into a private dinner between Eli and Asmir. And she doesn't know it, but they're talking about Rhett, and they're talking about his issues on and off the field, and whether or not Eli should take a chance on him, and what this is going to look like. And from there, she ends up at, not in this same scene, but the next time we see her, she's at a party at, I think, at Eli's house, and
Yep.
Jade is
Yep.
there, and everybody's there. I can't remember the occasion, but Rhett is there. She doesn't know who he is. He's there, but I feel like he sees her first, and she ends up like dropping her phone or somehow, or
Yep.
she leaves her phone
She leaves
somewhere.
it.
He
Hmm.
gets the number and ends up texting her at
Yep.
the party. So now they're at the party. She doesn't initially know who's texting her. She looks up and looks around, and it's him. And it's somebody who I think he's someone who she had initially looked at and thought was attractive. They decide
Yes.
to leave, but they don't leave together. It's not like they don't leave arm in arm. It's like he
Right.
walks out the door, and a couple seconds later, she does too. And they end up at his apartment. And they don't even make it to the bed, but not in the way that you normally see in romance, right? So they're
Right.
not, ripping each other's clothes off, and they had, before you know it, they having sex on the living room floor. Like they're ramping up, and in their foreplay, which is it's all bravado for him because he doesn't have any feelings for her yet. She just is a random John, and
Right.
so he ends up masturbating over her, but accidentally. Basically, he was like stroking himself to get her excited, and he ends up masturbating over her. And we found out later that that results in a pregnancy. But our first introduction to him is not this party; it's him having a threesome with two women,
Yep. Yep.
and we later find out that the threesome is in his dog's bedroom, which is why there's hair in one of the women's mouths.
Yep.
She mistakes it for weave hair, but it's actually dog hair. And the reason that Parker makes it to his room is because there's a woman in the dog's room at
Yep.
the very time that he's with Parker. And
Yep.
so when we first meet him, we don't really have a reason to like him. We don't. There's really not a whole. I mean, you could tell right off that he got a whole lot of swag and that he fine, and all of the descriptions, but the womanizer angle, where it's easy to misread him or misunderstand him, which is exactly what you were saying earlier. The womanizer angle is what we get first. So he gets on the squad. He becomes one of the Connecticut Kings. And one of the stipulations of his signing is that he see a therapist. And so in his first conversation with the therapist, he comes off as very chauvinistic and all of these other pieces. And the therapist challenges him to have a relationship with a woman that doesn't include his dick. And he finds out about Parker because, he's on the field, and they find out that he went home with her and she's Wright's ex. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know who she belongs to, and that kind of thing. He's very dismissive. And so now that he knows who Parker is, now that he knows that she's, tangentially connected to the team, he chooses her, or the therapist, I think, encourages him to choose her as the person he's going to develop a relationship with that doesn't include sex. And so he shows up at her house night after night. She ends up cooking for him. They sit at her or Jimmy's kitchen table, and they develop this friendship that obviously turns into much more. Um, and that was actually probably my favorite part of the book, like that wasn't really associated with the scene, but it was an element that I enjoyed because I think we've seen like the abstinence books before.
Yeah.
And I love a good abstinence book. I love a good I haven't had sex in 3 years, and then you have sex and you blow your cat back. And you know what I'm saying? I love all the anticipation associated with people who are voluntarily abstinent or whatever the case may be. But this was an interesting take on it for me because it wasn't just I haven't had sex because I found the right person. No, he was fully fucking. It was more like I'm supposed to get to know a woman and see if I can have a relationship with her without her asking for anything in return. And I think Parker's Parker only wanting him, and he says that Parker only wanting him and nothing else is what is one of the things that broadens his mind past even what his father knew, because his father has very different ideas about women. So I thought that was just a really interesting element. What about you?
Um, so let me back up because you called Brett a womanizer.
Oh,
And
oh Lord.
no, because let me say this. I guess what I would say about Rut is that from what we were told, everybody knew what time it was.
I can see
That's number
that.
one,
Yes.
right? And it may just be that we have different definitions of womanizer. Because for me, womanizer, also there's an implication there of some level of dishonesty or deception, I
I
think.
can see that. I can see that.
Right. So that's why I think I had a reaction to womanizer, because he prided
No,
himself
he actually was. Yeah, you're
on,
right.
right, you know what time it is, and so you make the decision eyes wide open
Yeah,
about whether or not you want to go down this road with me,
you're right. I
right?
will
And I
concede,
think,
counselor. I withdraw. I withdraw. I will
okay,
concede that you're right.
okay, okay. I'm just saying, because there was no, and I agree with you that the notion that he brought Parker home when he had another chick at the house, this is kind of like, really, bro? Really? This is what we
Mm-hmm.
doing? Okay, fine. But that wasn't his girlfriend, and presumably, right, she would have been told what time it was.
Right.
And we also know he wasn't the type to like just throw someone out the street butt naked. So
Mm-hmm.
Fats presumably made sure she got home, whatever the case may be.
It wasn't
But I
malicious. Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't out, in my opinion, or at least the way that I define disrespectful. I don't think it was necessarily outright disrespectful. It
Mm-hmm.
probably was brusque and like, oh, I didn't realize this was happening, but
That's a
not
good word.
some, right, not outright disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, to your point about how Parker ends up on his radar, I would agree with you that it was like, even though they slept together the first night they met, I I agree with you that the context in which he met Parker, the way the engagement and interaction started, Parker was already ahead of, and
Yeah.
or in a different category
Absolutely.
from the I met you in the club and we went home to smash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Parker legit didn't, to your point, didn't seem to know who he was, figured he was somehow affiliated with the team, but it's not like she was like, oh my goodness, oh, please take me home with you. And he recognized, right, that she was not reacting to him in a thirsty kind of way, right? You contrast that with Sherry, right? Sherry was all in his
Yes.
face, and he's thinking to
Yes.
himself, this old ass broad all in
Right,
my
girl. If you
face,
don't get on somewhere.
trying to throw her tits in my face, and she got this big old rock on her finger. Girl, go bye, broad, bye. Um, and so from the door, from the very beginning, their interactions with each other was one that I thought it was just a higher level engagement, which set the stage then. Because I actually didn't think, you know, contrary to his initial reaction to the therapist saying, you know, engage with her and get to know her without having sex with her, right? And he's like, oh man, oh my God. I
Mm-hmm.
actually didn't think that was as tall an order for Rut as he behaved,
Mm.
right? Because we knew that she wasn't telling him not to have sex with anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that this was a man who knew where to get it, was not shy about getting it if he wanted to, right? And if it was
Mm-hmm.
just about this, I got to get my dick wet whenever I can, he could have easily had it from one of the chicks that was in
Yeah.
his quote unquote stable, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily getting it from Parker. So it's like, yeah, I felt like, again, this was the Rut knew how to treat his categories, for lack of a better word, right,
Mm-hmm.
of women that he interacted with.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that was as tall. I thought it was going to be a tall order because he was so attracted to Parker, but not because he didn't have the self-control to engage with her and get to know her as a person, because he was already intrigued by the person, right,
Yeah.
not just by the sex.
Yeah. And intrigued
And
by the person, like you're saying from the very beginning, because he comments on like noticing that she's not like everybody else. She's a little bit
right,
naive, like she's
right,
got some nervous energy. And he could tell that she was not chestnut cherry. Like,
right, right. So I just, yeah, I mean, their dynamic, the stage was set even from that first night of it just being a different energy between the two of them. Not love at first sight, right?
mm-hmm.
But just something different for both of them. And then we see how things played out. I have to
Yeah.
say, though, also, not though, but his relationship with Sharky was just so adorable.
Yes.
And he's like, hey, baby. He's like, Daddy missed you, baby. Like, I had to Google a toaster because I was like, what does a toaster look like? What does that dog look like? I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, oh my goodness, But he's like, hey, baby. He's like, can you stop shedding in the bed?
Uh-huh.
This is the third time this week. you know.
Yeah, that was funny. And
Yeah.
like I also felt like well we've been talking a whole lot about love, but I will run down my love list and then we could do all or none or some and yours too. We'll just kind of mix it all up. Um I loved how they got to know each other. That part of it was a slow burn that I did not mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um the first time that he goes down on her where she is what my favorite part about that scene, Love Belvin knows how to write a sex scene. We all are very aware of that.
Yes.
But my favorite part about that scene is more her reaction, that she's kind of like shocked and excited and a little bit
Yeah.
ashamed and caught off guard. And she's like, no, but yes, but no. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
she's so it's like the whole tingles, like she was
Yes.
it was like her, it was coming back to her in a way that
Yes.
she was like, she remembered, but it
Yeah.
also felt very taboo because Jimmy is downstairs. I just appreciated her having all of those thoughts and feelings at the
Yes.
same time and eventually just
Yes.
letting it all go in that
Yes.
scene. I loved how he supported her at the funeral. Um,
Yes.
so for Brian's funeral, for B Rocker's funeral, this might be my favorite scene in the whole book where she says, if I could take the pain away, I would, or something. And he says, you would do that for me. And then they're talking about it because she's lost her best friend. And he says something like, I should be grieving for my friend, but all I can think about is how open I am for you.
Yeah.
It was just such a sweet, like he's groggy. I just could see it. I could just see his little
Yeah.
basement apartment in his mother's house all decked out. Ain't nobody really allowed down here. He went down there, he fell asleep. He wakes up to Parker coming to find him, and he sees her again and again as somebody that he can rely on, somebody that's going to be
Yeah.
present, somebody that's going to call him on his shit. It was just extremely well done. And then
Yeah.
we get the opposite, or not the opposite, but we get another funeral, which is Jimmy's service, and how he sets that up for her and is there and
Yes.
is supportive. I love that she went with him to the concert after B Rocka's funeral, and he wants her to
Mm-hmm.
go, but he's scared to say it. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
he's getting into a place where he's finally getting comfortable telling her what he needs.
Yeah.
And she goes with him, and I thought that was great. Mm, I understood, I didn't love it, but I understood her jealousy of his public life and the things that he had to do and his trying to
Yeah.
explain it to her without explaining it to her. I
Yeah.
loved her birthday party. I already talked about the characterization of his mother, and I love the proposal. It was just it was a different kind of hard eyes, but I was at the same level of awe like, oh,
Yeah.
as I was with Will and Ramsey or with Jordan Nicole, which is like such different stories, but they elicited from me the same, like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's we covered quite a few of the things that I love, but let me just go back to Jimmy's funeral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, with the thoughtfulness,
Yeah.
right? The thoughtfulness, because as much as he resented Jimmy for the place that he knew Jimmy had in Parker's life and the mental and emotional energy that she was devoting to him, when she needed him to be there for her,
Yep.
he was, right,
Yep.
in a very thoughtful and loving way, and without screaming, look at me, look what I've done for you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, I want to, in my notes I said Rut knew how to treat a woman,
Mm.
right? He knew how to be thoughtful and considerate. With her birthday, that
Yeah.
setup where he was like, look, I want to do something special for her, but it needs to be at the house because she's not going to be comfortable
Anywhere
being
else.
away
Yep.
from him for too long, right? So
Well,
we need to set up something nice.
right. And the foundation of her birthday, though, was when she asked him to take the trash out and he saw that the backyard was overgrown. And
Yes,
so the
yes,
first thing
and
he
was like, I
does,
can't believe the sons don't
yes,
even come over and
and
take
mow the
care of
damn
this. Yes,
lawn. Yes. And so the
yes,
first, the not
yes,
it's not the first thoughtful thing he does, but like the foundation for that was, I think he called Elle. I mean, he calls Elle a couple times
yes. He
for
did.
help,
He did.
and it's like I need a landscaper and whatever,
Yep,
and I just
yep.
it worked. But anyway, go ahead.
But it was to me, he displayed things, and this might have been a function by the fact that he was written by a woman, right? Because they were incredibly thoughtful touches and gestures that I think we as women think about things like that more than men typically do, right? So I loved his relationship with Divine, right? I loved that Divine really stepped up to the plate when he told Kadar, he said, I told you I would protect your seed. I told you I would nurture your son. And I've done that, right? I kept my word. And in the relationship with Divine and Rut, you saw this parent like, but
Mm-hmm.
they were clear Divine was not his father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't have to be said, you're not my father. There was a parent like respect dynamic there,
Yeah.
but not this pounding of the chest, Divine saying, I'm the father right now or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. And also Rut not, even when Rut had petulant moments about Divine, it never drifted into and you're not even my father, right? That
Mm-hmm.
kind of petulant teen, like, don't tell me what to do. I loved that relationship, right? When there's a moment when Divine is like, get your ass in the truck, right? He
Mm-hmm.
calls on maybe he's calling on Fat's phone. No, he's speaking on Rut's phone because this is before Rut throws the phone
Right.
and smashes it or whatever. But he's like, if you don't get your ass in the truck and go back to Connecticut, right? And Rut is almost like, God damn it, but he
Mm-hmm.
gets in the truck and he goes back because he knows that's what's best for him.
Right.
I loved the evolution, right, of his relationship with Sloane.
Yes.
And let me say this, because I thought about that scene a little bit more in preparation for our conversation. And I have a theory. And you'll tell me if you agree or disagree. But understanding that his initial reaction and interaction with Sloane was obviously disrespectful, inappropriate, misogynistic, right? Full stop. I also believe, though, that had that been a male coach that he did not recognize as like a former player,
Mm-hmm.
I think he would have been equally disrespectful and hostile to them because he was mad at the Kings, period.
Yeah.
Right? He was mad at the Kings organization for, him going so low, for them lowballing him on his
Mm-hmm.
contract. He knew they didn't want him, right? And he had this huge chip on his shoulder already,
Mm-hmm.
right? And with Sloane, it was easy to go to well, why don't you come over here and suck my dick? Because she was a woman.
Right.
But I actually believe that had it been a male coach, that he didn't recognize as like a former player. Because his bottom line was, you've never done this. Don't
Right.
tell me how to do it when you've never done it.
Right. Right.
Right? That was ultimately, when you strip the misogyny away, his bottom line to her was, you have never done this. Don't sit here and tell me how to do what you've never actually done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
I
agree with
think he would
that.
have taken that same tact with a male receiver coach. And he's like, I don't know you. You never played. Who are you? You
Mm-hmm.
are nobody. And this organization didn't want me anyway. I'm proving myself to y'all. I know I'm incredibly talented. F all y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, it doesn't take anything away from him being how wrong he was in how he engaged with Sloan. But I just felt like somebody was catching that bullet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was Sloan,
Mm-hmm.
and it was cloaked in misogyny, but somebody was catching that bullet because he was pissed off at the Kings and
Regardless,
he felt
yeah.
disrespected and mistreated by the Kings to begin with.
Well, and we
Somebody was getting
see,
cursed out.
right, and we see that he is equal opportunity with his anger or his frustration in, how he takes advantage of the guy that's selling the house. I can't think of his name right now. Or Terrence Grant, and how he didn't take advantage of him, but he
Yeah.
certainly made the best of that situation in his favor.
Yes.
But the guy whining and complaining, and kind of his slick comments
Yes.
and clapbacks to that guy,
Yes.
and the same clapbacks to Terrence Grant. And I
Yep.
think he does
Yep.
get into it either like with another coach or Nate or something like that. So I agree with you. I don't think it had. I don't. I think he used those comments at her because they were appropriate, quote unquote, appropriate ammunition for a woman to get under her skin.
Yep.
But if it had
Yep.
been a man, to your point, somebody he didn't recognize, he would have been equally as upset, and they would have equally got cussed out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was the mood that he was in at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like, who are you? Who are
Right.
you? I know I'm this phenomenally talented player who this organization didn't really want, and you're underestimating me, and you're probably, not giving me a full and fair chance, and I have to just suck it up and take it.
Well, and I think
So,
part of that is like part of that was to the Kings, but it was also he had a history of that. So he had to like red
absolutely.
shirt in
Yeah.
college.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
just there was a constant, he's a troublemaker. He got left back in school
Yep.
because his mother wouldn't take him to school. And smart kids get bored in class, and so they act up. And
Yep.
so I
Yep.
think it was like for him, it was here we go again. Nobody
Yep.
believes Rutt can do it. I always got to prove myself. I always got to show the
That's
fucking room
right.
that I'm here. Like nobody want to just take Rutt at face value. I always got to do some work to let y'all know who I am. And so
That's right.
I agree with you that the chip on his shoulder had less to do with him just being an asshole and more to do with him just having a history or a whole lot of experience with people taking him the wrong way, and him finally deciding, like, I
Yes.
don't care. Take me how you take me. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I'm not going to change your mind. I'm constantly having to work and prove myself. So whatever. I do whatever the fuck I want. Like,
Yes. One small thing. It was like like an appetizer or a side dish because we didn't get enough of it. The argument between Inga and Kadar,
oh, I
right,
wanted a
towards
whole
the
book
end
of
of the book.
arguments.
Seriously, and that's exactly what my notes said. I would have loved to have seen more of those two going
Yes.
at it, because
Yes.
you could tell just from that exchange. I was
Yes.
cackling and I was like, "Oh boy, those two are probably a hoot
And if
to
not
watch
for
go back and
Paula,
forth."
I would have paid cash money for a Kadar Inga enemies to lovers.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been very interesting. And with Inga and that whole dynamic, and you know not being, her not knowing her father because her mother, Inga just decided, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
remember when Parker says that was something that she and Jade shared in common, right? That
Yep.
their mothers just, decided their fathers there would never be any contact, and that's all there was to it. And
Mm-hmm.
Inga at least acknowledging, the deep regret that she was going to carry
Yeah.
for the rest of her life for the fact that Parker never got to meet her father, and she never got to make that right,
Mm-hmm.
and then that relationship evolving, right?
Right.
And because mother-daughter relationships, I mean, parent-child relationships, right?
They're fraught to
They
begin
can be
with.
quite, they are. And, it's fine to say that you shouldn't take out your stuff on your kids, but, unless you are someone that immediately recognizes it and you get yourself in therapy so that you have actual tips and strategies to navigate those waters and to not do that,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost inevitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some way or another, you take your stuff out on your kids.
Yep.
Um, and so I was glad that relationship by the end is in a much better place, and Inga humbling herself and just being like, please, I want to be a part of your life, and them working their way into something new. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't left with the sense that it wasn't all rosy, but it was like, Inga was like, okay, no, I need to get my stuff together because I want to be a part of my grandchild's life and I don't want to miss any more time with my daughter. And that means I'm going to swallow my pride and do my part, right? And bite my tongue and say less,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, so
And the ways that
just,
Inga advocates for her and Rut when she sees that there's the potential for it to go left.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yep,
she accepts that this kind of relationship may not be my thing, but it's clearly her thing. And let me keep her from emulating what she thinks she sees me do, right?
yes,
Because sometimes
yes,
we can do what we think our parents are doing and not really understand what they're actually doing and make a whole ass other different kind of mistake. And so
yes, yes.
she steps in and she doesn't let that happen. And that's after. So we can get into the stabbing because one moment of stabbing is Rut's response to her being pregnant.
Oh yeah. Oh
Whoo!
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my typically my favorite parts of romances are the breakup. I just love a good breakup. I just finished Ashley Nicole. I talk about her every episode, which is why I told her today that she'd have to come back and be on the podcast because she's on the podcast without being on the podcast because I'm constantly talking about her. But what is the Mason one where she tells him that she loves him and he gets distant after that because he's not sure if she loves him or if she just wants a
That's
Mason.
the most recent one. That's the
Okay,
most recent one.
so that's the one
Mm-hmm.
I finished, and I loved her. Now we talked about the whole other book. Readers, I'm sorry, it's been a long day for me. I'm very tired. I'm just getting back in town. So this is a chaotic episode, but go with me. We're all a family. It's fine. So she she tells him that she loves him. He gets distant, and then she goes to Connecticut without telling him. I think she lives in New York. She goes to Connecticut without telling him, and when he realizes that she's getting ready to be in and out of his
Yep.
city without saying a word, is when it kind of like wakes him up to like, oh shit, I have all the way fucked up. Like this might be over. And
Yeah.
I just love a good breakup in a romance. I live for the breakup because it makes the makeup so much sweeter. So all of that to
Yeah, I could
say,
see that. Mm-hmm.
when he got a pee, he half drunk. They went to the Brielle concert, and Parker is starstruck with Brielle. He got to call her name twice to get out the line,
Yep.
and they get back to the house, and he excited. He got to pee. He gonna eat her out. He got all kind of plans for the evening, and he sees the pregnancy test, and he texts Fats, and he like, come scoop me right fucking now. And when I tell you, I felt them words go through that text message, and
Yeah.
she comes up and she's trying to explain herself, and she says, I won't chase you, and he says, I wouldn't advise you to waste your fucking time.
Yep. Yep.
Man, oh man, as much
There
as
was
I
a
love him.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. And I thought about that today too, because that is one of the things that his reaction, um I confess, and this may sound crazy in light of what, how we had seen Rut conduct himself, but go with me on this because, like I said, I thought the way Rut conducted himself made sense to me. I'm not saying it was okay, but it made sense to me. So his reaction surprised me. And I felt like it was a combination of the way he found out and the fact that he was inebriated. right?
Okay.
And that just, it came together for just the worst reaction
Mm-hmm.
because candidly, right, the reality is Rut was no fool. Rut understood they had unprotected sex,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they had unprotected sex on her birthday. Now, granted, that's not when she got pregnant,
Right.
but right, they had unprotected sex. And so, and he knew Parker at that point well enough to know Parker was not the trapping type. Like, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
he knew that about her, right? And so I felt like he felt like it was a gotcha moment, even though that's clearly not how she intended it to be. That was not how it was laid out. It's just, I wondered whether, had he not been drunk and it not happen the way that it did, would if she had just gotten the opportunity to say, listen, I need to tell you something. I haven't been feeling well and I took a pregnancy test and it's positive. I don't know that I don't think, I'll just put my stake in the ground. I don't think his reaction would have been that explosively, horrifically bad as it was. I think he probably still would have been shocked and like, oh shit, I got to process this. But his reaction seemed to me more to be the circumstances themselves rather than, I can't believe Parker is pregnant with my child. Right? How did this happen? And again, that's not excusing his reaction. I'm not giving him any slack for that. He was dead wrong. But I just remember thinking, this seemed out of character for how he had been interacting with her, you know?
So I actually think his response doesn't have anything to do with her. So Rhett, through the course of this book, has a series of moments that jolt him. The first moment that jolts him is when they're at way in the beginning of the book where they're at Eli's house and he sees them in Paris. He has that
Yes.
vision of the future that kind of jolts him like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
One of the
Yep.
other ones that we see is when he's sitting at her dining room table and they get in some kind of argument and he says, man, this bitch, but the word won't come out of his mouth. And he physically is like,
Right.
whoa, like
Yep.
I can't
Yep.
even characterize her that way in my mind almost. And so I feel like this was another one of those jolting moments. I'm not going to say supernatural because we don't go that direction, even with the visions. I feel like that was kind of more like a premonition, or I don't know, like we don't go supernatural in this book, but I feel like it was another moment of him trying to, like, him being shaken awake about, like, your future is going to look a little bit different than what you planned. This person is a little bit different than what you planned. Like, wake up. You know what I mean? It was almost
Yeah.
like it was really somebody banging pots and pans over his head. So I feel like in line with those moments that really rock, like Brian dying, like that really is a moment that like shook him. And he just had like so many of those moments in this book that was about him. He says at the end, maturing so that he can
Yeah.
be that eligible receiver. I feel
Yes.
like that reaction didn't have anything to do with her. And the reason why I know it's true is because, or think it's true based on this fictional book of characters that I'm talking about as if they're real. The reason that I know it's true is because of what you said, which is, had she sat down with him and was like, remember when you skeeted on me, sir?
Right.
Like, his reaction would have been different, which means that this doesn't have anything to do with her. I think
That's right. No, yes.
it was
I
about
think you're
him
absolutely right.
processing
Yeah.
and another
Yes, you're
moment of
absolutely
him
right.
being shaken awake.
Yes. Yes. That's brilliantly put. I think that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head with it. Yep.
And so
Yep.
I did still want to stab him. We cannot miss that.
I agree. No, I agree. I agree. That's why I said I wasn't cutting him any slack. I wasn't, as much as I loved him, I was like, bruh, you are out. And I felt like he knew that as soon as he, right? It was,
Hmm.
even though we didn't get that on the page, I felt like shortly after, not an hour or
Mm-hmm.
two, a day later, I felt like shortly after he knew he had messed up, but it was
Absolutely.
like, damn,
Because
right?
when he finally comes to her house after camp or something, I think it's after when camp is over, because I think she moves in while he's gone. Um, he talks about how she's been really cold and he done found every
Yep.
reason to come by the house. Hey, did you need some paper towels? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? I saw a leaf in your yard. I just wanted to let you know that it is almost fall because the leaves are starting to fall. Like, sir, can you get away from my property, please? Like, stop coming
Right.
over
Right.
here.
Right.
Um,
Right.
that he felt how cold she was and how
Yeah.
distant she was. And he eventually says, you acting like I haven't been trying. And
Right.
this is the night when he finds out that Jimmy died. That she talks about, like, I don't get to say the first thing that pops into my head. I don't get to
Yes.
treat
That's right.
people any kind of
That's right.
way. So
That's right.
I do feel like it was all about him. I think that the arc was him growing up in this very specific way because he was already a grown
Yeah.
man, but he had to grow up in this way. And I think it was about her, like her arc is a little murkier for me, but the one thing that I can see that eventually comes out is she has to take a step. Like she has to actively make a decision and move on it. And the first, not
Yes.
the first, but the most impactful decision that we see her make is when she accepts his proposal. All the way up until then, she just going with life.
Yeah.
Like wherever it take her, that's where she show up. From talking to Jade on the phone and getting invited to the party and texting back and forth. She find out she pregnant. There's never any discussion of an abortion or what she gonna do. She just go with the pregnancy. She ends up with Jimmy. She just goes with living with Jimmy. She end up in the house that Rut built. She end up in the house. You know what I mean?
Well, hold on. Let's back up a minute because with the pregnancy, that was actually more, there was more deliberate thought behind that than I think you're giving credit, right? Because remember, they had a conversation about children, and she said, she absolutely wanted children. She just never wanted to be somebody's wife.
Oh, that's
Remember?
right.
Because
Yes,
remember, that's another bone of contention for him because
that's
he's like, she
right.
doesn't even want the
Me.
whole
That's what
thing
he
with
says
me.
today.
She just
That's
wants the
right.
baby,
That's
right?
right.
Which I also thought was an interesting kind of, because it's like, it's almost like, well, bruh, I mean, based on the way you've been moving, one might say, wouldn't you prefer that rather than,
That's right.
a woman is trying to lock you down specifically? So I
Right.
thought that was an interesting show of his vulnerability and kind of a, not a contradiction, but a bit of a dichotomy that was there, right? Because it's like, if
Yeah.
all you're worried about is gold diggers, yes, she's not a gold digger, but now your little fifis are
Right.
hurt because you're like, she'll have this baby without me, you know,
You're absolutely right.
and go on about her business.
Right.
I
As she
also
should.
thought, exactly, as you were talking, I thought how ironic that it was while it was the older man that took from her, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sucked, energy, years, time, so on and so forth. It was the younger man, right? The
Yes.
most unlikely who added to her, right?
Yes.
Personally and professionally, right? Getting her thinking about, well, what do you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And helping her set things in motion business wise, and then also building this family, right? Because she had all of these concerns, understandably so, about dealing with, I think he was 24, and by this point Parker was already 28, 29. She said, oh my God, I'm 2 years older
Mm-hmm.
than you, and so on and so forth. And he turned out to be, you know as we saw, right, truly
Right.
this for his need to mature in a particular area, as you said, he was actually quite mature,
Mm-hmm.
right, and quite worldly, and poured into her and invested in her and brought great things out of her,
Mm-hmm.
such that you were not caught up in the age difference anymore, because you were like, no, she's dealing with a man, like
Yeah.
she's dealing with a man, right? Not some young boy, the way we might have thought when we first met him.
Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with
Yeah.
that. I guess we can go to hate. Of course, Jimmy's kids, we already talked to. Oh, now, well, no,
Yep.
that's surprise. So with Jimmy's kids are terrible. We hate them. They can die. We are angry at Rhett for how he responded to the pregnancy. His father's fight with Divine and that being a little bit
Yep.
sticky. What surprised me, I will say, is Rhett's conversation with Jimmy, quote unquote conversation,
Mm, mm, mm-hmm,
where he
mm-hmm.
kind of sneaks into her room, to his room, and
Yep.
he's like, "Is Parker a real one? Like, is she about that game life?"
Yep.
I thought that was another moment or another thing that was really well done. And I think that also was a moment that showed his vulnerability because he was trying to figure,
Yep.
I think for him, he was kind of like, I'm already in too deep, no
Yep.
disrespect, you know what I'm saying? But I need to know. Cause
Yep.
like, I all the way love this girl, like all the way. It has
Yeah.
happened. It has
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
So I love that, but the scene surprised me that he would be that vulnerable, but I think it shows his growth to that point. But
Yeah.
it was also it was a little bit of like a gut wrenching scene because he's running out of time. Parker and them getting ready to come back downstairs. He got to figure out how to, like, the one blink, the two blink. What is he saying? It was a very
Right.
tense, like, yes, it was a very tense scene because for Rhett, it was almost like everything is riding on this conversation.
Yeah. And the fact that he would, like, he even says to himself, right, like, this is messed up. This man is
Mm-hmm.
dying, and here I am trying to have a conversation with him about whether or not Parker, is a real one or not,
Yes.
right? So he,
Yes.
like, was self-aware enough to recognize this was not appropriate. And it's like, really, of all things, like, this man is, staring at the end of his road, and this becomes like,
Right.
but I think, to your point, it showed the depth of his vulnerability because
Mm-hmm.
he felt compelled, like he had
He
to
needed to
know,
know. Yep.
because he knew he was crazy about her, and he was trying to make sure that she was all that she appeared to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like she seemed too good to be true.
Yes.
And he's just kind of like, I need to know.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I thought that was a great
yeah.
moment. Anything surprise you? Or anything else other than what we
Just
talked about?
nothing beyond what we already talked about. I love this couple.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
very cute.
I already know I'm going to go back, right, and start from Love in the End Zone and just go through all the books
Mm-hmm.
again, just because, right? Just
Yeah.
because.
Yeah, it's hard not to because the world, like I have fallen into it. Like I'm in the world of the Connecticut Kings. I'm
Yes,
so excited
yes.
about Friday and
Yes. And it makes you, like, you want to hang out there, right? Like, I
right.
want to hang out in this world for a little bit longer because you just get caught up. Like, I don't think I've ever been able to just read one. Maybe Rhett and Parker are that exception, but I feel like anytime I've read one of the others, it's pulled me back in.
Yes,
And
yes,
that's
yes.
how I end up rereading
The
the
series,
other
yep.
ones, right? Because I'm like, oh, I want to revisit this couple. And then I want to revisit, I just want
Absolutely.
to keep going, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, so we did I think we are at favorite character.
Rhett's my favorite. I mean,
Yeah, same here.
yeah,
It's an easy one.
yeah.
Least
And
favorite.
then, I mean, Jimmy's kids, right?
Okay,
It was
yeah.
easy to, and Emily was probably, close
We have
behind.
not talked about Emily.
Because,
Oh, that was a thing that surprised me. I was surprised that Elle was pushing this Emily Ursage, whatever, that she was pushing that. Especially, I mean, I understood as a publicist and like as a public relations thing, and maybe I know at that point she either didn't know about Parker or know about Russ's feelings for Parker, but it seemed like Elle, really? Like, this is what we doing? I get it. People do it all the time, these fake relationships, but it just didn't seem a very Elle thing to do.
but I also felt like it was a recipe that they knew had worked.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right, I mean, it was a recipe. And remember, they were dealing with Rut, who was someone that needed arguably extra special,
Mm-hmm.
right, marketing. Like, they couldn't just
That's
do
true.
the run of the mill stuff for him because of the baggage that came with him.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. I don't think this is something that Elle would have just been recommending as a matter of course. But I think
Mm-hmm.
for Rut, it was like, look, this is an easy way for us to pretty up, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? Because I hate to say clean up, but, pretty up your rough around the edges thing. And it's going to give you a level of credibility you're not going to get on your own because you got too much baggage. And that it looks too much like angry black man who's out of control.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
So
Yeah, and then the whole
I didn't like that went on as long as it did, because I did wonder to myself, had Emily not gotten pregnant by her mother's boyfriend, which, like, ew, how much longer he would have let it go, even though he was unhappy and uncomfortable and really wanted to end the situation. But it's like those dividends that Elle had promised, they were bearing fruit, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like he wasn't getting anything out of it. But I was just like, if she hadn't popped up pregnant to let him off the hook, how much longer would this thing have gone?
Yeah.
So, because by then Parker was pregnant, right? And he knew Parker was pregnant. It was like, this is just, oh gosh, this needs to end. We need this little charade to end already.
Immediately.
So,
I am done. You should be too.
Exactly.
No, yeah, that's true. My least favorite character, aside from Jimmy's kids, was Terrence Grant.
Oh God, he's so annoying.
He can go.
He's so annoying. I appreciated, right, kind of harkening back to last week, I appreciated when Trent was like, I had to whoop Terrence Grant's ass for approaching my pregnant wife.
Right. Why was he always around?
I was like, finally, someone gave him the ass whipping he desperately needed, because God, I wanted him to get beat up too. Go away.
I'm also sad that we didn't get the scene of him getting his ass beat.
Oh, he was so annoying. It was like, go away.
Yeah.
Go away. But I loved when Rutt was like, Park, let's not have no more.
Yes.
Like that's just not, let's not have no more. Like he's like looking at the flowers and he's like,
that could get ugly real quick. Watch it.
Right.
Watch
exactly. And that's all. Like, it wasn't the shouting. It wasn't, I'm throwing these flowers in the garbage. It was just like, let's not have any more of that. That could get ugly real quick.
Yeah.
And he was right. Like it was a point well taken, because they were teenage, right? His point was, obviously he was being territorial, but his point about that could cause a problem in the locker room was absolutely accurate, right? They're teenage. Terrence was being ridiculously messy. I felt he was both being territorial, but he was also like, we're teenage, right? Yeah. And that's just not gonna work. Like, Terrence Grant wasn't just some random dude in Parker's life. He was a teenage. And he knew Terrence was being messy to be messy. He's like, we can't have that. Yeah. Like, we can't have that. I will say, so kind of jumping to who do I want to get their own book? Fats. I want Fats to get a book. I was like, go Fats. I love you, Fats. You're like the silent assassin, and I love you.
Yeah.
Because I loved how Fats peeped what was going on, right? When Sherry shows up and is like, well, you're going to have to be out, or whatever the case may be, right? He was picking up, I think, Rutt's glasses. And he's like, are you okay, Parker? And she's like, I'm fine. Right. But Fats was like, okay, you ain't fine, but I'm not going to harp on it with you. I'm just going to report back to my man, let him know what's going on.
Exactly.
And then when he showed up with, the moving truck and whatnot, because clearly the way Fats is described, we know that Fats could have broke both Jerry and Jimmy into sheriff, aside or not, right? But you can tell that's not Fats' style. And he was just like, look, get out my face. I'm helping her get her stuff. I'm not engaging with you. Right. And you could also tell that infuriated them, right? The fact that she had this backup, that she was not by just, being completely victimized by them, by herself, that this large man came and clearly there was support behind her, not just physically in terms of his imposing strength, but that someone was there to support her so that her things weren't just on the corner in garbage bags.
And how sad is it that they wanted that for her?
Yeah.
It's just like, y'all super are terrible.
Yeah, really, really terrible and super petty. And just, Sherry was like, well, if you let us pawn that big old engagement ring. And I'm just like, sis, that ain't got nothing to do with it, right? Like, knock it off. You know what I'm saying?
Die in the fire
emotions
tonight.
Are not logical. Right, exactly. Emotions are not logical, and they were evil people anyway. And, and also, but it made me think of something as an aside, in terms of the dynamic between parents and children. I feel like there is a relatively short window where you have your children's love and affection, right? That like godlike worship, just
Mm-hmm.
off GP,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just off GP, because they don't know anything different.
Right.
And then they hit an age where now that has to be earned, or it can be lost, right? And certainly by the time, children become adults, the relationship between them and their parents is no longer that pristine, nothing ever happened, and I worship you the way I did when I was 2. And all I wanted you to do was just pick me up and carry me around the house all day, And so, look, I without question, I felt that Jimmy's children were awful people, but they also clearly had the kind of relationship with their father that he in part built with them. And that becomes the dangerous thing, right? When you haven't made the investment,
right?
And then the tables turn where you're the one that's more so now in need. That's when those chickens can come home to roost in a very unpleasant way. And I felt like we were also seeing that play out with Jimmy and his kids.
And the sad thing about it, I think, is that he knew.
Yeah.
He knew they wasn't about shit. He knew they wasn't going to do shit.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Which is a sad state of affairs for sure.
Yeah.
I think, did we do it all? I think so. I continue respect to Paula. I continue to ship some alternate universe of Inga and Kadar.
Yes.
But Paula is here. We love Paula. Paula, get well. We glad that you better. Recovery is serious business. So no shade to Paula.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we did everything. Are there any questions that you still have?
Not questions. I mean, because, we get an update about them. We know that we get an update that they're married in Tori's books. And there's actually a cute little friendship between Tori and Rut. So you get to see that, just snippets of it. I look forward to when they have, their second child, because remember, Rut was kind of like, we good.
In a couple years, like, no, maybe.
I think I want another one, right? I loved when he was like, you'd be crazy to turn all this down.
Yes, it was so cute. It was really adorable.
Bifocals and Sharky and, and Grayson and whatnot. So I'd love to just see, do they, is it a baby Rut or is it another little girl or,
it's a moment.
But you can just tell.
The whole situation is a moment. Yeah.
It really was. Little Grace and Brianna. And he was like, pissed him off. She did that, but it was what it was, and him just completely melting over his daughter. And there's I think it is in Tori's book, because Candace, Jackson's sister, still messy. She kind of makes a comment about wanting to get a good look at Rut. And Tori's like, you mean married father Rut? Happily married father Rut? Because it's clear that he's all in and completely devoted to his family and not even, thinking about anything else. So I just loved it. I just love this couple. I love them. I mean, I love all the couples, but like I said, Rut is just special to me.